To devalue their currency, Bitcoin wins. In the world of fiat currencies, Bitcoin is the victor.
I mean, that's part of the bull case for Bitcoin.
If you're not paying attention, you probably should be.
What is up, freaks? Welcome back to Tales from the Crypt. It's your boy Marty Bent here for a lovely, what's today, Tuesday morning rip with my good friend Whitney Webb. Whitney, welcome back to the show.
Hey, great to be here. How's it going?
Going good. Happy that you're here. I know it's a very busy time in your life, but I think it's time for a catch up. I mean, the last time we talked was earlier this year. It had to be in like the spring or maybe over the summer. And you are one of the most prescient people that I know. You've called a lot of the stuff that has unfolded in the wake of the COVID-19 lockdowns and the economic lockdowns that we've experienced over the last 18 months. We went from 2 weeks to flatten the curve to if you don't jab your kids, you're not going to be able to get food. And you were calling this very early on. How does it feel to have foreseen all this?
Well, okay, so it doesn't feel good, obviously, because it's a worst case scenario, but it's not like something I just prophesized and whatever. I mean, this is all stuff that these people have had plans for a long time. And it was really obvious they were waiting for some sort of global 9/11 style event to usher it all in. Right. So in the case of vaccine passports, I mean, I think that's one of the main impulses behind the infinite booster jab scenario that they've essentially announced formally in places like the UK and Chile. You know, a lot of that is about keeping the vaccine passport thing going, which is really all about ID 2020, the digital ID thing. Because without that digital biometric ID, all of this other control grid stuff they want to do, including CBDCs, for example, but a lot of other stuff, you know, they need that's like the cornerstone of the whole fourth industrial revolution thing that they want to usher in, of which CBDCs are a part. But, you know, it's also basically having a central, all your existing IDs, like your debit card, your credit card, your passport. If you live in an urban area, like your transport card to go on the subway or something like that, they want all of that, you know, to just be this one thing that's centralized that they can see exactly what you're doing. And it's also linked to your social media accounts. I mean, they have plans for this from going back to 2014. There's a really telling graphic for people that want to look it up from the World Economic Forum from, I think it's a report on digital identity from September 2018. It's pretty unreal, but I mean, it pretty much shows you that digital ID is at the center of all this other stuff they want to do, including smart cities and all of that. And that, you know, one of the main founders of ID 2020 is the Gavi Vaccine Alliance and was running pilot programs to usher in the same type of control grid, whatever you want to, surveillance system, whatever you want to call it, in Africa, for example, in 2018. And then as soon as COVID rolled around, they were like, oh yeah, we'll just make it the vaccine passport too. And a lot of, these groups behind the vaccine passports in the US, like the Vaccine Credential Initiative, for example, you know, they have a lot of ties to ID 2020 or the national security state that's been invested in this process for a long time. And they actually tried to do it in the US after 9/11, but couldn't because Congress at the time in 2003 said this would eliminate privacy, literally eliminate privacy. They're right. It still will do that. They just don't care now. I guess they've, spent the last 2 decades or so trying to buy people more people off, consolidate control.
Well, control. That's all they want to do is control everybody, which is very creepy. But they try to control all of us under the guise of protecting all of us. That's what the last 18 months has been is, hey, we're going to protect you. We need more control. And now,
it's this whole collectivist sales pitch. And we're seeing it now with climate change too, right?
Yeah. And that's the meat of the topic. You said, what do you want to focus on? And that's been a big focus on this show and in my newsletter in recent months is it seems like there's an attempted controlled demolition of the global economy to usher in this dystopian future. And so we had the lockdowns which allow them to print a bunch of money. So they're messing up the money, which is going to get people more desperate. We had COP26 recently that just ended. And it seems that all these power elites are ready to come back from Glasgow and tell all of us that we need to stop eating meat and using fossil fuels. And they're actively shutting down reliable energy sources here in the United States, in the UK, across Europe. And on top of that, they're, again, coming after the food chain as well. Trying to make it hard to process meats. And then there's actually something going on. I'm not sure if you're keeping tabs on this, but it seems like the government is the federal government here in the U.S. is confiscating farmland under the using eminent domain to build a 1,300-mile
carbon sequestration pipeline in Iowa.
Yes, exactly. So you've been paying attention to that?
Yeah, well, so the thing is that method of carbon sequestration, it's kind of interesting that they're pumping it to North Dakota, because that liquid carbon sequestration method was previously developed by the oil industry for something they call enhanced oil recovery. And North Dakota was the site of a fracking boom, but the wells are dying. So what normally the oil industry would do to reactivate those wells is pump carbon into them. And now they can just do the same thing, but say they're fighting climate change, while also confiscating a bunch of farmland from, the main, one of the main food producing states in the U.S., Iowa.
Well, we're seeing it's Iowa, Illinois, Missouri. I think they're confiscating land all throughout that area. And
eminent domain is insane, and people should have been mad about it a long time ago when it was going on for oil pipelines, just because it's so egregious and a huge violation of private land ownership rights. Mm-hmm. But, here we are.
Here we are. But are these people trying to manufacture an energy and food crisis to make us desperate to push us into, and they're going to blame climate change?
Right. So climate change, they've been trying to scare people with it for a really long time, and it hasn't really worked on a mass level. COVID did that, right? But climate change, they've been, Al Gore had an inconvenient truth, and there's been these campaigns about it ever since. But what better way to get people scared about it when they're cold and hungry and told that the culprit is climate change, right?
Yeah. Get them desperate, get them cold, get them hungry, and then take more control. And that's like the meat of what we wanted to talk about is the DAVOS class. They're trying to basically securitize the natural world now. They're taking it to another level. So Car, can you pull up that article, Car?
So basically the article I think you're referring to is about natural asset corporations. The one you have up is about the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero. But in the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero, or GFANZ article, I do talk about natural asset corporations. So basically that was a team up between the New York Stock Exchange with something called the Intrinsic Exchange Group, which is basically the Rockefeller Foundation. And basically those two groups.
This one right here?
Yes.
That one? Okay.
Yeah. So, I'm talking about one that's linked within this article. But they're called natural asset corporations. And if you go to that article or to the Intrinsic Exchange Group's website, you can see how they explain how this works per them. But basically what they are doing is they are quantifying assets that are technically part of what is considered to be the global commons, something that hasn't been monetized or isn't part of the existing economy, something like the ecological process by which trees turn carbon dioxide into breathable air, for example. And basically what they want to do is basically quantify that in financial terms, have it managed and controlled and owned by a natural asset corporation, which then raises money through an IPO. And then at that IPO, it can be bought by really whoever. It can be bought by BlackRock. It can be bought by a sovereign wealth fund from a Saudi prince. doesn't really matter, but really anyone can buy it at that point. But they sort of don't really frame it that way, and they claim that, by doing the IPO, all of this money can come from, can go towards conservation and all of this stuff of the Natural Asset Corporation. But really what they're doing is licensing access to stuff that people have never had to pay for access to before, which is, the air you breathe, the water you drink, your access to, I don't know, I guess it would be like tourism in a sense too, if you're going to visit the natural world, some natural feature, a national park, or things like that. And their pilot program is in Costa Rica, which is pretty alarming when you consider that in this article, it's on the screen, the other one here. They also have this huge focus on emerging economies. I'll, if it's okay, I'll pull up the link for this Wall Street Natural Asset Corporation and put it in the
while
chat
you're
so
pulling that up, like
Yeah.
you said, they're trying to securitize and create gates to access natural goods that we've never had hurdles to access before. And again, everything they're doing right now is to attempt to force us to be controlled by some lever, whether it be financial, mainly financial.
This is a complete different level to the, people have been repeating the you'll own nothing and be happy thing, right? So this is like, it's not even talking about things you own right now. It's talking about things no one has ever owned, like the ecological processes upon which all life is based. Rivers, lakes, things like that are now just going to be bought and sold and traded on the New York Stock Exchange. There's the graphic that about how to make a natural asset company per these guys. They call it nature's economy, quantifying nature's economy.
Okay, for you freaks listening at home that aren't on video, you work with natural asset owners. What is a natural asset owner? To identify sites with substantial ecosystem services or potential for ecosystem restoration. The management and governance of natural asset companies comes into play. And then you convert that to financial capital. It's your run-of-the-mill securitization play. They're trying to create mortgage-backed securities for life's natural processes. It's fucking insane.
It's totally insane. And this really got no coverage when it happened in mid-September. I learned about this from Corey Morningstar, who's one of the best in the game when it comes to researching and exposing this stuff. And I was just, I was personally floored. I was like, well, that really slipped under the radar, didn't it? But this is how they're going to do a lot of this so-called climate change net zero stuff. Wall Street basically is going to take ownership of the natural world and claim they're protecting it. And it's really not surprising when you consider that like heads of major conservation groups like the Nature Conservancy, like Henry Paulson, Secretary of the Treasury under Bush, was the head of that for like several years. That's the kind of people they look for, ex-Goldman Sachs goons. And Mark Carney, of course, also being a key guy in this. He's also ex-Goldman Sachs.
Well, let's dump into these, and Larry Fink as well. So Hank Paulson, he was the one who basically forced America to bail out the banks. He went and fear-mongered. Hey,
under threat of martial law. Fun guy.
Yeah.
He clearly cares about the planet and the natural world.
Mark Carney is another one that flies under the radar. Like any freak listening to this who has not watched the documentary, it's on YouTube. I hope it's still on YouTube. The Planary's Men, PLENARY''S. Mark Carney is a huge focal point in that, and it revolves around the HSBC Mexican drug cartel money laundering scandal that basically got pushed under the rug. He used some wizardry to basically skirt U.S. banking regulations, and it basically proves that there's a supranational banking elite that live outside the laws of any sovereign nation. And then we have Larry Fink, BlackRock, who seems to be a darling of the financial asset space. People seem to look up to him, have him on a pedestal. But if you look into the things he supports and the narratives he's pushing, it seems that he's a leader for the crew that is trying to push us towards this dystopian future where we have no autonomy and things are very granularly controlled.
Right. Well, this is even crazier, too. The graphic that was just up a little bit more, this is how they described the opportunity of natural asset corporations. So they frame it originally, right, as, oh, this will help us protect the natural world better. But for them, the opportunity is actually that they can access, the existing asset value of all assets in the current economy is $512 trillion per their estimates, but by adding nature's economy, it can be 4 quadrillion. That's the opportunity. And they say it pretty obvious. I mean, they make it pretty clear there. I mean, it's just a way to keep their casino going. Once, there's going to be this sort of controlled demolition of the existing economy, this forced transition into net zero, climate change justified, surveillance economy, CBDCs, and all of this stuff. But they'll have so many new assets that they can own and trade amongst themselves. Hooray. Oh, I bet that'll make Larry Fink so happy. He's already very happy.
He's one of the biggest hypocrites in the world. They're all hypocrites. So let's talk about the hypocrisy of COP26. You have all these world leaders flying in private jets to Glasgow to virtue signal about saving the climate, and they literally don't care about the environment or the climate. They care about control. It's not
virtue signaling, though, I think, because I don't think these guys give a shit about that stuff. They're trying to manufacture consent for their policies by going and giving speeches saying, like, this is the greatest threat to humanity, blah, blah, blah. But their actions show that they don't actually believe that. Joe Biden takes like an 85-car motorcade and I guess the presidential private plane and then other ones for all the people in his entourage. He gives this speech about China and Russia are so bad for not coming. I am so great. Climate change is utter doom. And then he falls asleep right after that speech. So it's like, you could say it's virtue signaling, but really I think they just are trying to manufacture consent enough with people, trying to scare them into supporting these decisions. Because basically you have a climate change movement led by someone like Greta Thunberg, who doesn't support any concrete policies. She just runs around going like, do something, we have to do something,
blah, blah,
right?
blah.
But not specifying what that something is, which of course gives license to, people like Mark Carney, the UN's current climate action and finance advisor, to do that something, right? The only specific thing Greta Thunberg has asked for over the past month has been that the UN declare climate change on par, like a level 3 crisis on par with COVID-19, which of course will just give them power to legislate and create edicts, I guess, like they did with COVID-19, but for climate change. Yeah. And now we're having people being literally diagnosed with climate change in Canada.
So let's dive into that, right? Like somebody died recently, and they blamed it on was like cause of death.
Well, it wasn't died. They had like respiratory difficulties and some I guess an arrhythmia or something, like a cardiac issue, and the doctor said it was climate change and gave this whole spiel that we're not addressing the underlying cause. And now they're saying things like, oh, these this spate of heart problems and strokes in young people and children, and an anticipated spike in heart defects in infants is going to be due to climate change. So that's a conveniently timed narrative, given some other things that have been going on with recent revelations about heart inflammation being caused by a certain medical product.
Yeah. And I don't want to let this go because you have the countless examples of like European soccer players just dying on the pitch or falling with cardiac arrest. You have that. There's just been too many anecdotal stories for it to be a coincidence. Like it is. I'll be bold enough to say like the vaccine is creating heart problems for young people around the world right now. You had that free diver who had to basically retire early. You had that mountain biker who had to retire early. You have countless other individuals throughout the world who are dropping dead. You have like high school football players. It seems to be a myocarditis driven by the vaccine that is causing all this. And now they're coming after the kids. They want to mandate vaccines for 5 to 11-year-olds where this doesn't even, the COVID doesn't even affect them any worse than the flu, excuse me. It doesn't make any sense to force these mandates, yet they creepily keep insisting, despite the fact that there's countless examples that this is doing something terribly wrong for young people specifically.
Yeah. So, I mean, if they don't get all of society, including children, on the vaccine passport system, it won't work. Right. Because like I mentioned earlier, this is a segue into ID 2020. ID 2020 is meant to be from birth, the moment of birth until death. They call it persistence. It's a persistent ID. That's their word for it.
Yeah, I mean, it's literally like we're the pod people in the Matrix, though. That's what they want.
But it's permanent, right? And so they want it to have as much data about you as possible, so that they can, analyze it with AI and all this stuff. I mean, that's where a lot of this is going as well. I did a report for people that are interested about the controlled demolition of the economy we're seeing now. People said I predicted that last year, but really I just wrote about the National Security Commission on Artificial Intelligence, headed by former Google head Eric Schmidt. That was basically like, we have to remove all of the structural obstacles that keep the U.S. from being like China, basically. And we have to implement all of these different technologies, mass surveillance, get people to have their entire lives on their smartphone so they can be more easily surveilled, and things like that. Otherwise, we will lose our economic and technological hegemony and military hegemony to China. That's how they framed it. And it was stuff like, we do eliminate private car ownership. We have to stop having in-person doctor visits. This was all written in 2019. And they were like, if we don't do this immediately, we'll lose to China. And then COVID-19 happens and they start sort of forcing this all on. And, the other thing, too, in that report was cashless society, smartphone-based digital wallets, which ID 2020 links directly with your electronic health records. It's COVID-19 vaccines for now. Then it's all vaccines, right, that are deemed mandatory by the state, and then it's all of your electronic health records.
And then
That's this planned segue for that.
And then beyond that, they want to put like RFID or chips into like food, like nano chips into food so that when you eat food, like you scan that and that has a carbon credit associated with it. And like that's part of this supply chain plan the World Economic Forum came up with a while ago, where they claim that it will help you know exactly where your food came from. It'll help you trace it from the point of origin to where it gets on your table. That's how they used to frame it. Starbucks was a pioneer in that, with Starbucks' proprietary artificial intelligence algorithm. It's pretty insane. And Starbucks was actually involved in the vaccine rollout in Washington State because of their supply chain tracking expertise, apparently, through that AI development. Pretty weird to have Starbucks be involved in the vaccination campaign, right? That makes everything here makes a lot of sense. Well, yeah, Starbucks. At one point, McDonald's was involved. You could go to McDonald's and get a jab and a free cheeseburger at the same time. It's all very creepy, Whitney. It freaks me out because a lot of people are going with the hook, line, and sinker. And despite the fact that it's becoming blatantly obvious that, number one, the vaccine is not as effective as it was advertised, and number two, it is seeming increasingly likely that it is causing adverse side effects to millions of people, or maybe not thousands of people at least.
There's a way to lie with statistics, and I think there's a whole book with that title, and actually Bill Gates was photocopied next to it, or his photograph next to a copy of it. Right. So basically the figures from Pfizer and Moderna specifically, before they got emergency use authorization in the US last December, were all about where, it was 94.5, 95. Well, really it was Pfizer said 90, Moderna said 94.5. Pfizer came back and said, wait, we've revised our statistics, and now it's 95%. And that's sort of how that went. It should have been pretty obvious. It was a marketing thing to at least people paying attention. But anyway, they measured relative efficacy, not absolute efficacy. And there was a lot of other problems with their reporting of data and other things. I mean, a lot of those trials weren't even complete. And in the cases I note in my recent series in Moderna said that a lot of the trials that were done by the NIH that were used to justify their emergency use authorization was not the same as their commercial product, meaning that the safety and efficacy data was based on a different formula than what actually went to market.
Well, let's lean into this Moderna stuff too, because they received special treatment by the from the NIH, right, to get this, and they were working on this.
It was a partnership. Yeah. Yeah, and $6 billion of taxpayer money thus far for early access to the Moderna vaccine, which is even by official data considered to be the most dangerous out of all of them in terms of myocarditis risk. It's a real mess. So, I mean, there's a lot in this article. It's actually 2 articles. It's going to be 3. But basically, Moderna was at the point of collapsing. In 2019, they'd run out of money, and they actually recently admitted it, like in the end of October, said that if COVID hadn't come along, we would have completely collapsed as a company. And there's a lot of stuff. If you go back and read the first installment of that series, it's very obvious that they were basically Theranos, claiming they're going to revolutionize medicine, but they don't have they won't show their data to anyone. They have all these high-profile firings. Everyone has to sign really intense non-disclosure agreements. And they had to abandon a lot of their therapies. They actually pivoted to vaccines because they couldn't give any mRNA product they were producing with their lipid nanoparticle delivery system that required more than 1 dose. And so the only product they could develop that required 1 or at the most 2 doses were vaccines. So they pivoted to vaccines specifically for that reason and abandoned all their other planned therapies, which raises major concerns about the booster dose. In the case of Moderna, because you're exceeding 2 doses of a Moderna product, obviously, and they've tried to claim that it's not the same delivery system, but it's most likely is. If you read my report, it's pretty clear that they're trying to hide something. It's very suspect, the whole thing, as is the foreknowledge of Moderna, and also one of the lead NIH researchers that partnered with them, Barney Graham, about COVID-19 becoming a biblical plague moment, and how they ended up deciding to develop a COVID-19 vaccine even before the sequence of SARS-CoV-2 was even officially released, and a lot of other extreme fuckery, because basically at that point, when Moderna decided to develop the COVID-19 vaccine, their only remaining investors, the company was about to collapse, right? And their only remaining investor says, don't do vaccines, invest in the other more profitable stuff. We don't want you to pursue a vaccine, especially on a virus no one knows about. And they gambled everything on that project. Anyway, they obviously knew something, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's like they hide this stuff in plain sight. And people call you crazy for pointing this out. Like, that's another creepy thing. Like, it's like Pfizer, Moderna are like the Gucci and Chanel of 2021. Like, ooh, did you get your Pfizer or your Moderna? Like, this Moderna specifically just hopped on the scene out of nowhere, and everybody just has 100% trust in their ability to deliver a safe and effective medicine to the global populace, and people are really running with it.
Well, like, it should be a national scandal that Moderna claims their top executives say that what the NIH tested for safety and efficacy that was used to justify the approval of their vaccine is not the same as their commercial candidate or product now that it's been approved.
Yeah,
that's nuts.
It's insane. there's a good chance we'll get kicked off YouTube for this, for just having this discussion right now. Like,
yeah, it tends to be that way. If you really want to get kicked off, we can talk about who decided in September, this September, is now going to make all the RNA for Moderna's vaccine. It's a CIA front company. They're shady as fuck.
Let's go for it. Who's pushing this?
Well, this is going to be in part 3, the last part of my Moderna series that I hope to finish before I have a baby in a couple of weeks. So we'll see how it goes. But the company is called Resilience. It was originally called National Resilience. It's backed by, I mean, it's just spooks, basically. You have one of them, like Joe Lonsdale, one of the guys that founded Palantir, his top chief of staff, and a guy that worked in that whole Palantir Thielverse nexus. You have Scott Gottlieb, the former FDA commissioner, who always forgets to admit that he is on the board of Pfizer when he goes on TV. He's also on the board of a company called Illumina that's behind a lot of the genetic data harvesting from COVID-19 tests. You have a CEO from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. You have a former 9/11 commission member. He belongs there, right? A guy that was on the 9/11 commission. This is the executive team. I'm talking about the board of directors, which is pretty whack. Who else do they have on there? Oh, the head of NQTEL is there. The CIA's NQTEL is on this board as well. And there's a couple other national security people. So the national security state is basically behind this company. They signed an agreement with Moderna to make the RNA for their mRNA vaccine for COVID-19 for several more years. They won't specify how many years, but we know in 2020, Moderna made an agreement to produce their COVID-19 vaccine with a European company called Lonza for the next 10 years. So it's at least a decade-long booster shot future. That they've already planned out, and basically the way they're selling the booster thing to the public, they're being like, oh yeah, well now the data is showing that immunity wanes. This was the plan the whole time. They made agreements for manufacturing booster shots in 2020 for the next decade, right? And this company, this Resilience company, launched in November 2020 to basically be the manufacturing capacity for the booster shots. And it's run by all these the people on the board are all have all these either spook connections or big pharma connections. It's all very creepy. It's a mess.
It's very
super creepy. It's super creepy.
Like they changed the definition of natural immunity, herd immunity, the definition of a vaccine like 3 times in the last year or something like that. And so 10 years of boosters, like are people going to put out with that? That's like one thing I want to loop back to, something you said earlier. It's like this only works if everybody complies. Like what are your thoughts right now? How are you feeling about the state of individuals wanting to push back against this, starting to realize like, hey, this really doesn't make sense? Are you optimistic that enough people are going to be like, I'm not vaccinating my kids, I'm not going along with this, this obviously doesn't work?
I think there's more hope right now in the English speaking world, because we're also seeing major efforts to clamp down on any sort of dissenting information. I mean, obviously in the past year and a half, there's been a lot of censorship around a lot of important topics. But I think they've announced a sort of a renewed wave of censorship is coming, whether it's for climate change discussions, or other things. I think it's going to pick up, and they wouldn't be doing that if those, the people saying things they didn't want them to say weren't having an impact. And in the case of vaccinating kids in the U.S., I mean, there have been some high-profile voices that backed the initial vaccine campaign, but won't support it for kids because of the risk-benefit issue there, where it's much more risky than beneficial in the case of kids, because, even officially the vaccine doesn't stop transmission. It just reduces officially, right, severity of illness and your likelihood of going to the hospital and dying. And kids aren't really at risk from COVID-19. So why would you give it to them? Right. Yeah. Especially if they're, in the case of there was a University of California study, boys 12 to 15 had like a 6.5 times, or what was it? 6.5 times more likely to get myocarditis than to be saved from COVID by the vaccine. Why would you mandate that?
I mean,
it doesn't make any sense. So there are some kids of parents who are vaccinated who are like, I don't really think it makes sense to vaccinate my kids. So that may be a moment where people are like, huh? That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But, it depends. It depends. It also looks like at the same time, the Western world has something else up its sleeve, which is starting a giant war, tensions with Russia and this whole Belarus thing in Ukraine. They've ratcheted up just in the past couple of weeks. And then before that, it was China and Taiwan. And it looks like they're going to, mess that around, because when all else fails, take them to war. That's the banker strategy for like over 100 years. So
divide. And if that
if you want to remake the financial system, what do? You take the world to war. That's how Bretton Woods happened, right?
Yeah.
And Mark Carney and that whole GFANZ, Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero crowd, they call this the new Bretton Woods moment. That we're on the precipice of that. So if you can't get it through and not in peacetime, got to make a war.
Oh, it's so frustrating on many levels. Number one, I got to say this is why we Bitcoin freaks, we're trying to create a system that's separate from this, that can allow us to opt out of this madness that we really haven't even opted into, which is the banker-controlled world that we're describing here. Bitcoin provides us an alternative to that. And then number two, again, going back to hypocrisy, like I too have noticed that Russia and China, again, are becoming the distraction boogeyman to focus on. And it's hilarious. We had years here in the United States, particularly, of the left side of the political aisle screaming Russian interference, Russia meddling with elections and all that. And then we literally have somebody right now, and we were describing her as Saleh Asmarova, who is nominated to be the Comptroller of the currency in the United States, comes from Kazakhstan, went to Moscow University, won the Leninist Award there while she was studying there. And now she is about to be nominated to control our currency, and nobody's saying a thing about this. Like, you want to talk about meddling? Well,
sure. So like Russiagate, was obviously like a manufactured, like just bullshit narrative that's totally fallen apart, even more so with time than it did to any initial scrutiny. But you have to keep in mind too, who are the two main adversary states of the US, Russia and China. Okay, so you have like people on the right rapidly being like everything is to blame on Xi Jinping, and it's the CCP that's the mastermind of everything in the world, and they're the real bad guys. And then on the shitlib left, you have people saying, oh, it's Vladimir Putin, it's Russia, they're the ones behind everything. And it's very convenient that they have both sides of the mainstream political spectrum hating and blaming everything on one of the main adversary states of the U.S. They have one side focused on China and one side focused on Russia. It's very convenient for one group in particular, and that's the national security state. Because really, at this point, looking at stuff on the nation state level is meant for us. It's like theater for us,
exactly.
Right? The regular people. The real levers of power are transnational or supranational, and they're determined by capital, not by boundaries. So, it's so different than a lot of the way most people, I think about it. I mean, if you just look at someone like who's also involved in all this climate finance bullshit, like Mike Bloomberg, I think it started this week. It may be next week. He has the Bloomberg New Economy Forum this week, and it's all about building the new economy with U.S. and China together leading the way. And it's all these U.S. and Chinese politicians and diplomats and business leaders coming together this used to be Bloomberg launched this after the World Economic Forum stopped launching their equivalent forum for U.S. China behind the scenes ties. That was called the Annual Meeting of the New Champions. That was the name. But now it's the Bloomberg New Economy Forum led by Michael Bloomberg, Henry Paulson, yet again, and Henry Kissinger, everyone's favorite Henry.
How do you describe him?
Really.
A vat of demonic fluid?
I have lots of... I've called him a couple things. I think you're talking about a blob of satanic jello. I think that was a crowd favorite for Kissinger. He's gross. And but those guys, Henry Kissinger too was involved in that whole National Security Commission on AI stuff to an extent as well. We can't have war with China. We have to become China to beat China. Type of thing, and we have to build the new world order with China to avoid a catastrophic war, basically. Yeah, so this is the New Economy Forum. This is where the shit's happening, right? And it's China and the U.S. are very chummy at events like this. But it says right in there that it's very focused on that. It's focused on climate change and mRNA vaccines. What do you know?
So creepy. Yeah. So for any of you guys at home who can't see this, COVID-19 held a mirror to society's biggest problems, from climate change to inequality, forcing humanity to grapple with their consequences. But there is hope, even as the pandemic still rages. The success of groundbreaking mRNA vaccines, the acceleration of the digital economy during lockdowns, and a focus on government spending to save lives and improve livelihoods demonstrate that humankind is capable of taking on and overcoming great challenges. Breakthroughs are possible. In science and technology, we've entered a new age of discovery. This complete dystopian fucking bullshit
Bill
fodder.
Gates is on the board of this too. So it's like Bloomberg, Bill Gates, Henry Paulson, Kissinger, Tony Blair, the head of Bayer Monsanto.
That's another thing. Like Bayer Monsanto merged years ago, and now they're talking about delivering food to market with vaccines in it already. You're gonna be eating your vaccines in the future.
Yeah, that was a Gates funded thing from a couple years ago. These people only will stop when we make them stop. But this is like the follow up to COP26. Right now in the media, they're framing COP26 as a failure and all of this stuff. No, the bankers made substantial plans and substantial announcements about their near-term ambitions, as they called it, and now pretty much all those same guys are meeting at this.
Wait a second.
This thing.
Wait, we got to stop. Any of you listening? CZ from Binance is on this. Binance is co-opted. Get off Binance if you're on it. This dude runs a crypto exchange.
Yeah, I'm familiar with Binance, and I don't use it. So definitely take a look at this. Is the next conference where decisions are going to be made. But that's like, the power structure. What we really have, the best description I've seen of the existing supranational power structure that really runs shit was sort of mapped out by a really brilliant researcher named Ian Davis. He calls it the global public-private partnership. He puts the Bank of International Settlements at the top, the central banks, and then below that, the global think tanks, World Economic Forum, CFR, Chatham House, all of those guys who actually make the policy. So BIS, central banks, and these guys create the policy. It's then distributed to national governments by groups like the United Nations or people like the Bill Gates through his foundation, the IMF, the World Bank money flows, essentially. And then the national governments adopt those policies and enforce them on the public, but they don't actually make policy anymore. Your national government doesn't make policy anymore. That's why all these different governments around the world seem to be, reading from the same legislative handbook during COVID-19 and with all this other stuff in diverse areas, and why people like me look at what the World Economic Forum and these other groups have had planned out for years, because that's where the policy is really coming from.
Yeah.
And it's just being handed down to national governments to enforce it on the plebs,
the
public.
Like you said, it's these supranational organizations filled with unelected bureaucrats who make this. So in the Bitcoin space, I focused on a lot the Financial Action Task Force, which is this not a governing body, but they create guidelines. They recommend guidelines for banking and financial regulations that just so happen to get broadly adopted by every government and regulator that they present them to. But this is an unelected board of people based out of, I mean, it's international, but their headquarters is in France, and they're able to put these guidelines forward that get adopted and push us closer and closer to the digital panopticon. It drives me insane, particularly with Bitcoin, because with the Financial Action Task Force, they're trying to push through guidelines for virtual asset service providers or Bitcoin exchanges, and then it goes to it extends to open source wallet providers, and they're trying to make it illegal to send peer-to-peer Bitcoin transactions. They want me to, if I send you Bitcoin from a wallet that I control, that's not decentralized.
Hey, but if it's peer-to-peer and decentralized, how can they know what you're spending? You'll make Augustine Carson so upset, Marty.
Well, they need to know. They need to have control. Well, they notice that Bitcoin enables this type of transaction. They're trying to nip it in the bud. Nobody's really talking about outside of Bitcoiners, but
yeah, well, this is part of the whole reason why ransomwares or the ransomware attacks or the way all these cyber attacks are being carried out, because the goal there, this is also planned out by the World Economic Forum's Partnership Against Cybercrime. It's about ending financial anonymity completely. They don't want any sort of anonymous financial transaction, cash or digital asset that can be made anonymous or more private. They don't want any sort of competition to CBDCs, because obviously CBDCs will be so unattractive compared to everything else. They have to eliminate everything else in order to have mass adoption of CBDC. Otherwise, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
And the other thing is we're already seeing the other plan out of that Partnership Against Cybercrime, in which the FBI and other parts of the U.S. government are members, as is the UK government and Israel's government, and a bunch of massive Wall Street banks, is about ending online anonymity, period, not just financial anonymity. Online anonymity in its entirety, and that's why in these other countries, just in the past couple months, they've proposed it in the UK and France formally, tying your government-issued ID to your social media accounts.
Yeah, and even further to your IP address. They want to go that far. It's fucked.
Yeah, and in the UK, they're talking about, if you troll or you're deemed to troll someone on social media, 2 years in jail. Yeah, so this all comes from the Partnership Against Cybercrime, which are the big banks and US, UK, and Israel, basically, and some Silicon Valley companies in there. I think Amazon's in there, Palantir's in there, but they're government contractors anyway. They're not really private tech companies, especially not Palantir. His first client for its first 6 years as a company was the CIA, and it was founded with In-Q-Tel money, and it was dreamt up by Peter Thiel working with Richard Pearl. Yeah.
Let's remind the freaks who Richard Pearl is.
Oh, yeah, the crazy neocon dude from the Bush administration, also Reagan administration, arch neocon, top guy at PNAC, Project for a New American Century, if you're familiar with them as well. Basically, what Peter Thiel was doing was resurrecting total information awareness, which is this Panopticon program. I mean, you can look up the logo for DARPA's total information awareness after 9/11. It's just crazy in the sense that, it makes you sit there and be like, all the conspiracy theorists were right. It's like the most conspiracy symbol-laden logo to ever come out of a U.S. government program, I think. But it was basically, it's like the one-eyed pyramid on the dollar. It's like a beam coming out of the eye and shining all over the world, surveilling it. It was like a total surveillance program. The one that was going to eliminate all privacy that I mentioned earlier. Yeah, so that's what Palantir is. There was complaints about TIA, total information awareness, because it was run by the military. So what Thiel did is he just made it a private sector venture entirely, but with the involvement of a lot of the same people who like led that office, like John Poindexter, who's an Iran-Contra criminal from the Reagan administration. Isn't that logo nuts?
Yeah, look at the Latin in it too. Sentia est potentia. Believe it says like knowledge is power or information is power.
Science is power.
Science is
at
power.
The bottom.
Science is power. Science. The science. Trust the science. Don't question the science. Science is power.
Well, science is power, isn't it? Because now it's a religion for some people. Bow at the altar of whatever the scientists say. Like that's gone well historically.
Well, they've completely bastardized the term science. Or like it's not open for debate. The science is the science.
Isn't science a method of inquiry and not like a dogmatic religion?
It's literally defined as an ongoing debate about how the world works.
It was once, but the definitions of so much shit has been changed in the past year and a half. Why not just change the definition of science too?
Yeah. Well, we're gonna be labeled white supremacist, terrorist, homegrown terrorist. That's what we're gonna be labeled if we're not already. So.
Yeah, the war on domestic terror. That's a fun one. That's another thing they announced last year, well before January 6th. Basically, this lady from DHS in like early February 2020 was like, oh, there's going to be another 9/11. It's not going to but for domestic terrorism, and it's not going to kill as many people or be as visually bad, but it's going to be just like that. And then January 6th happened, and they're all like, oh, it's the next 9/11 on the TV.
Yeah, on the TV, they're like, it's the worst thing. It's insulting. They're like, it's the worst attack on American soil since 9/11. It's like, are you fucking kidding me? They were walking within the red ropes. They looked like they were lost. And now it's becoming obvious that the FBI had a bunch of
ran the whole thing. Yeah. Well, I mean, the FBI also had a weird role in the 1993 World Trade Center bombing.
Yep.
And most of the terror attacks they foiled after 9/11, they had actually set up themselves. So they're an agency of entrapment, not of investigation.
I would agree.
That's what the FBI. That's what the FBI does these days. They also cover things up. If they're not entrapping people, they're covering up Epstein scandals, things like that, or the anthrax attacks that were traced back to the the U.S. military far too quickly. They had gamed out, done a whole simulation called Dark Winter right before. Where they were going to blame it on Saddam Hussein working with Al Qaeda to spread anthrax everywhere, and it got traced back to the U.S. military too quickly. And so the FBI had like an 11-year investigation that was just a joke called Amerithrax. Their lead investigators later became whistleblowers and denounced it. Pretty insane. By the way, one of the main guys that did the Dark Winter simulation, Robert Cadlick, simulated COVID, a Crimson Contagion, it was called, in 2019, a coronavirus pandemic originating in China that lasted from June to August of 2019. And he led Trump's entire coronavirus response, including the funding of the Moderna vaccine and lots of other stuff.
Yeah,
he's a guy people should look at.
Yeah, and that's the other thing, too, we should really highlight is that, again, it's supranational. It doesn't matter who's president. Like, Trump started Operation Warp Speed. And a lot of people were like, no, like, Biden took it over. And it's funny because while Trump was still in office and Operation Warp Speed was going on, everybody on the left was like, oh, no, I'll never take it. Biden gets in office. They're like, oh, give it to me. Give me the boosters.
Oh, now that the orange man is gone and the senile guy is here, the vaccine's going to be so much safer. Okay. It's impressive. Some of the mental jumps people have made.
Well, how do we shake people out of this? Like that, I want to paint an optimistic view of the future because I do think people are starting to wake up and be like, well, this is way too much, way too fast.
All right.
Do you think they're slipping up? Do you think they're slipping up?
I hope so, but I think people like you and me and other people that talk about this stuff that are still reaching people, there might need to be some tweaking of strategies in the sense that, in terms of the vaccine, everyone has their opinions about it. But honestly, the threat here is the vaccine passport digital ID system. You can point to people that think the vaccine is a good thing or support the vaccination campaign, you can still point out the perils of the digital vaccine passport system and its ties to ID 2020 and all this stuff, and rally support around that, just like with the climate change debate. Instead of being like, is climate change real? Is it the doomsday threat they say it is? Instead of getting in that debate, which, raises tensions and can be really divisive, be like, why are we letting the bankers remake all of society to save the planet? No one that believes even the official climate change narrative should support that. And my most recent article, the one that you had up at the beginning of the stream on G-fans, I think that's a really good way to reach people on the left, because it's showing basically that it's Wall Street neocolonialism masquerading as saving the planet. And those are things that, and same with the natural asset corporations. There's no way that people on the left should be supporting that. And frankly, the progressive left is a target of a lot of this propaganda for a lot of these agendas. They tend to sell this stuff, as we mentioned earlier, sort of in this collectivist way. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, sort of a Star Trek style way of selling it. But really, this is if you look at what's actually going on, it's to the benefit of the bankers. And COP26, from the perspective of the people attending it, was not a failure, because this shit happened. And this is what this is very bad. And they basically are going to do this. They've already announced it. These are their plans. And if you read the attached document in their progress report, they tell you exactly what they're going to do. Wall Street is going, and the central bankers are going to take over the IMF and the World Bank and the regional development banks. They're going to use it to eliminate national sovereignty in emerging markets and developing countries, basically, so that they can have the members of their alliance, all these banks and asset managers, force investment products, those projects, those countries would normally not accept. And a lot of it has to do with mining. If you look at a company called Cobalt, Cobalt Metals, it's Michael Bloomberg, it's Mark Zuckerberg, it's Reid Hoffman from LinkedIn. It's I think I mentioned Bloomberg being on there already. Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, all those guys are there. Twitter. They say, they say we need all of the world's lithium, all of the world's cobalt, all of the world's nickel. That's what they're coming for. And they're going to use this G-fan shit to do it and say we're saving the planet, but really they're just going to mine the whole fucking planet.
Yeah. No, if you go down on our profile, there's a tweet about it. Yeah, and that's like the crazy thing. And like the extraction of those precious rare earth metals is very energy intensive, and it leverages a lot of slave. It leverages a lot of slave labor if you look into it as well.
Well, totally. And it's extremely environmentally destructive. This isn't about saving the planet at all. This is about the bankers getting away what they want with lots of creative sales pitches and their ability to control the flow of information through media consumption. Basically, what we're seeing happen right now is that historically, or at least in Western democracies, there's been like a degree of separation between the public or public policy and the bankers. That's going away.
This is not.
They're getting rid of that. There's not even going to be an illusion of a degree of separation there anymore.
Well, they're going to try to, and this is why I'm so happy to have somebody like you on the show. Not only on the show, but the fact that you're alive and producing this information that is so badly needed right now. We are at an inflection point in human history, and we have two directions we can go in, freaks. Anybody listen to this? We can keep getting cattle herded into this dystopian nightmare run by a select group of people that always seem to brush elbows with each other, no matter it be for a vaccine mandate or securitizing the world's natural resources. It seems everybody's like, oh, Marty, like you're Marty Jones, like you're a conspiracy theorist. Like they're not planning all this, but like that's one thing I love about your reporting is that you highlight many months, sometimes years in advance, that they have plans and they are actively executing them. Like you can go, that's part of the whole like wizardry of it. They say it out loud and put it in publications and choreograph it.
Follow the money. Follow the money is not a conspiracy theory. follow the money is what anyone that wants to know what's actually happening in the world should do. And if you follow the money and you look at what the bankers are doing, it's really obvious what the plan is. It's to completely remake and transform the financial system, and with it, all of society, everything else, using their control over the economy to affect those changes. People should keep in mind that this whole pivot towards climate change saving the planet is going on with them launching the metaverse, with them launching all this fourth industrial revolution crap that doesn't have anything to do with let's live in nature with harmony and hooray. It has to do with like matrix hellscape. Let's make that planet Earth. No, let's not do that.
It's some disgusting form of nihilistic escapism. Like, oh, the world that we have is so far gone, we can't fix it. Here, go into your pod and we'll construct a perfect world for you in the metaverse.
Well, they're already selling the metaverse pretty hard, and they have been well before Facebook had the whole name change hoopla. I think there's even a dumb show on US cable where it's like American Idol, but your avatar sings, and all these people perform as
that's like some demonic programming right there. It's called like The Mask or something like that. They wear like
I think it's called like alter egos or something like that. Because someone sent me a clip of it, and basically the people that were performing as their avatars were like, "That's actually the real me. That's how I really feel. That's who I really am." And all of this stuff trying to get us to identify with a digital version of ourselves and not our real selves, and to identify with a digital version of society. I think the NFT push to an extent is being used for this as well. That you identify more with what you own digitally than what you own in the real world. You're allowed to own NFTs, but you're not allowed to own anything in the real world anymore, or something like that.
Oh, that's such a good connection there. It's like, hey, you can't own this land.
You can own an NFT car, but you can't own a car in real life.
Yeah. And like you've done some research too, like with the Ethereum Foundation. There's some people involved across some of these agencies as well.
You might be thinking of someone else. I haven't actually dug into that, but there are some shady groups there. Yeah, there's
that it's
oh man.
But it's happening.
Zuckerberg's insane. I just can't even believe watching his sales pitch for the metaverse thing. They put out like an hour of video, and oh man, he has to try really hard to like act like a human being.
Well, that's another thing that gives me hope, is that these people are so woefully disconnected from reality and normal people. Like I think conversations like this, where I like to think of myself as a normal guy and you as a normal woman, just shooting the shit. And I think people resonate with this type of conversation over Mark Zuckerberg being like, hey, join me in the metaverse. We're going to pick our clothes digitally. And
it's just so dumb, because he's like, look, this is my home space in the metaverse. And look, I can pick anything. I can pick my house, my view out the window to be anything I want. And it's like this Hawaiian tropical island. And it's like, dude, you're taking over the entire island of Kauai in Hawaii. You like basically own an island.
Isn't he building walls there too? Isn't he like building walls and pissing people off
their land and like being a huge dick? Probably so they don't make fun of him because he can't rub in sunscreen or some shit, you know?
He's a kook.
Really. But I mean, that's basically, the billionaires are going to own everything, and you're going to be licensed access to it, maybe, if you're a good enough citizen and your little social credit score is high enough. But then you have Jeff Bezos come out the other day and be like, well, actually, most people are going to live in space, and only the privileged few will get to live on Earth anymore, and everyone else will live and work in space colonies. Well, can you imagine what a Bezos-run space colony is going to be like? Just imagine your whole family living the Amazon warehouse lifestyle.
Yeah.
I mean,
wake up, citizen! It's time to tape some boxes together.
Yeah. I mean, it's insane. No bathroom breaks for your fight. I mean,
Yeah, it is insane.
And it's just.
But again, it feels like it's so insane that it's like hitting such an extreme that the pendulum has to swing back. Like people need freedom.
People need to see it, and hopefully they'll fuck up enough that people do. But I think, unfortunately, it has to get worse before it gets better.
It can get worse. It can get worse.
Yeah.
How bad is it going to be? What do they have planned? All right, so I guess that's where we can transition to.
We talked about this earlier. They're manufacturing a supply chain crisis that's going to become a food crisis and an energy crisis. People will die from that for sure.
I wrote about
they
it.
Want people desperate. I mean, the only way they can really force this stuff through, one is controlling the flow of information to the greatest extent possible, but one is having the vast majority of the population in a state of extreme fear and vulnerability until they complete their transformation of the economy.
Yeah.
Right. So they can't do that unless they have people freaked out like they were in early 2020 for COVID. They need to keep that going for years, and I think they've realized that all they can really do is to obtain that. The closest thing they can get is to have people hungry and cold.
Yeah, Car, can you go to TFTC? I mean, I wrote a newsletter about this earlier this week. They go down full on assault from all angles. Like they are manufacturing this in real time, and that's like, I want to get this message out vehemently because they're, again, food shortage, energy crisis. They're trying to manufacture it leading into 2022. You have somebody like Saleh Asmarov wanting to completely destroy natural gas and oil accessibility for normal people in the United States. You have Joe Biden going down and pretending like posturing like he's going to shut down a very reliable pipeline in the northern Midwest part of the country. And then at the same time, again, with the eminent domain stuff going on in the Midwest, they want to take that farmland, basically eliminate the crops, and put up solar panels and wind turbines that will destroy the ecosystems below them, and you won't be able to use that for farmland anymore. It'll be farmland for energy that'll be pretty unreliable and inconsistent.
It's a total mess. But basically, this food crisis that's coming and the supply chain crisis we're seeing now, there are people that report on this stuff. A really good source of information for this is Christian Westbrook, Ice Age Farmer. If you're familiar, yes. He has a YouTube channel still, I think.
I linked to one of his things in this.
He's been documenting how they've been setting this up for a long time. And so they know that the food crisis is coming and they're not doing anything about it. The public is going to be the last to know. Remember how right before COVID-19 in January, there were all those big profile, like a bunch of CEOs resigned and all of this stuff because they got a tip that something big was going. I mean, they always know that the public is always the last to know. So now they're letting the supply chain crisis come be seen by people. The public is starting to catch on that something may not be right there. They're starting to talk about it on 60 Minutes and explain why and all of this stuff, right? Okay, so, they've been setting this up for a long time. And there's actually an event 201 for this that's called, it was called Food Chain Reaction. It was the John Podesta Clinton-linked think tank, Center for American Progress with Cargill, one of the biggest big ag companies in the U.S., I think Mars Inc., and then the World Wildlife Fund, which is the most co-opted of all environmental NGOs, arguably. But it's a real... and they gamed this out starting in 2020. The simulation was in 2015, and they gamed it out from 2020 to 2030. And the end result is global carbon markets.
It's coming, freaks. They want to do it. And it's scary how quickly it's happening because the natural gas shortage is leading to fertilizer shortages. Like 2022, there is going to be food shortages. And
but they planned all this out. The energy shortage leads to this, and this is how it becomes a food crisis. And they're letting it all happen. I mean, because they know. They know. And they know that hungry people will come to the government looking for handouts. And then the government can be like, well, you want your food ration to stay alive? You have to do this, that, and this. Oh, don't have your booster up to date. Don't want another one. You're not going to be eating.
Yeah. It's scary, freaks. And this is their plan. It's happening. It's being implemented. And we need to get this information out there. We need to fight.
Well, you also need to prepare especially if you have a family, stock up on food, learn to grow food, develop some skills. Bitcoin's cool in the sense of you're trying to develop a parallel project that's decentralized, but it won't feed you
No,
and
you
your
can't.
family in this type of crisis they're building. So you got to look at it from both sides, you know.
You can't eat your Bitcoin. That's for damn sure.
Buy a water filter, buy some seeds, and buy some books to learn how to, like, I don't know, feed yourself.
Yeah, and say hi to your neighbors. Get to know your neighbors a bit. Maybe get some guns. Probably a good idea as well. Fuck, Whitney. I wanted to end this on a positive note, but we're like, go buy guns and stock up on food.
I mean, but that is positive in a sense. I mean, the more resilient the population is, the better we can fight back. If they want to force people to a situation where they're cold and hungry and desperate and barely able to survive, the more we can survive when they try and pull the plug, the harder it will be for them to do that to people.
Yeah.
So, I mean, really, the best way out is to build a resilient local community.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And speak up vocally. There's a silent majority out there that, I don't want to say it's silent majority, but there's a silent group of people out there who know this stuff to be true, but they can see what's happening and they can connect the dots logically of what's leading to what is the order of operations and who is putting those order of operations in motions. And yet they're afraid to speak out and say, hey, this is happening and this is bad, because they're afraid of being labeled a conspiracy theorist. Freaks, if you're one of those people at home who's worried about this, like, the time to worry about that, to stop worrying about that is right now. Because again, that's why I'm so vocal in the newsletter and on the show. And I've been getting a lot of shit. Like, hey, Marty, just like focus on Bitcoin. Stop talking about this other stuff. It's all connected. It's all connected. Like, like Bitcoin is a tool to fight against this madness, but it is connected to the narrative that we're talking about in this episode in some way, loosely connected, but it is connected in the sense that it's a solution to the problems we're describing. But talking about describing problems, more and more people need to get out there and let other people who are somewhat asleep aware that this problem is happening. These people do have a plan that has been set in motion, is being executed. I don't want to say flawlessly. I think they have a lot of problems with their execution, which provides an opportunity for people like us.
Yeah, but we make it easy for them too, you know?
In what way?
Like the whole success for them, a lot of it relies on divide and conquer of regular people. That's why I was saying earlier, you know, a lot of people are divided over the vaccine issue. How bad is the vaccine? What does it do? Blah, blah, blah. But, you know, if we can move the focus from that divisive topic to vaccine passports are a tool for mass surveillance and total control, and it's very bad. And here's why, you know, you sort of bypass that divisive topic. Same thing with climate change. We don't want the bankers to take over the world, do we? No one likes bankers on the left or the right. So let's stop their global coup. And we don't even have to talk about climate science to say that's bad.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because we're spending so much time on these divisive topics. And I'm not saying like don't talk about them. But if you're trying to convince people that think differently from you, focus less on the divisive topic and go to the root of the issue. And more often than not, the root of the issue is where the bankers are at and what they're doing, right?
I mean, you'll hear it often in Bitcoin: fix the money, fix the world. Like those who control the money control the world to a certain extent. And that's what, I'm sorry for pushing us back towards Bitcoin so many times, but I truly believe like that is the root of the problem.
You have a
money.
Bitcoin podcast. It's fine.
Yeah. Well, speaking of which, if you're listening to this podcast at unlimitedhangout.com, Whitney has a Bitcoin donation page. If you guys want to support her work, which is incredible work, and you should want to support it because it is important that we get this information out there, you can support her with Bitcoin. She's got her BTC Pay server set up. What are your thoughts on Bitcoin these days? Are you pro Bitcoin, anti Bitcoin?
Well, so what I'm focusing on personally is putting as much of my money as I can in things that I will need when the food and energy crisis hits, right? So I bought a little plot of land not that long ago, which is dope. I'm going to put a house on it and, you know, eke out an existence. Oh, I live in Chile, right? So things here are actually like much worse than they are in the US. In terms of like vaccine passport adoption and obedience to the state on a lot of this stuff and even awareness of what's going on. very bad here. And also, this whole natural asset corporation stuff is very focused on places like southern Chile, southern Argentina, because of the water. There's a lot of fresh water there, which is good from the perspective of, I'm trying to eke out an existence. Okay, cool. So I can find like property with fresh water for really cheap down here. Right. But at the same time, Chile in the north has a bunch of lithium and most of the world's copper, which these cobalt metal guys, the billionaires behind that, want to take complete control over. And the government is just selling Chile out, and people in Chile have like no idea. I mean, you can try and tell them, but it's like, whoop, everyone wears a mask outside. Most people mask up their kids voluntarily. It's not even required. It's unreal.
Yeah, that's
obviously not me and not my kid, right? But I mean, in terms of
that is one of the
a societal level, it's very different here. So basically, I'm just investing in stuff that will have value, whether the power's running or it's not. At that point, but I do have crypto holdings, I guess you could say, and I honestly wouldn't have been able to have bought the land that I just bought if it wasn't for Bitcoin and crypto. So
hell yeah, just keep stacking Bitcoin on the side. Get your hard assets and then get your hard digital asset as well. That's I think.
But it's really important to emphasize both, right?
Yes.
So
yes.
That's at least for me. But I also spent a lot of time before I even did the work I do now. I used to be a farm manager. I studied a lot of like agroecology stuff in university. But I think, even if you don't own land or you don't have the ability to buy a plot of land or something like that, definitely invest your time in learning how that stuff works, because that knowledge, those skills will be useful even if you can't afford the hard assets, right? Like there's something you can do regardless of what you have to sort of like learn how to eke out an existence, because that's really where this is going, and that's how you can support your community even if you don't have those assets. Maybe someone does, and you can help them out, and you can like mutually survive together, because what they're doing is they're trying to force the global population through crises of extreme duress without a break in between one after another, into a global slavery system.
Yeah, they're trying to break you down.
And if you don't want to be a slave, you have to figure out how to be resilient and how to be independent of the system.
Hopefully we can get as many people as possible listening to this to become as resilient as possible. Get a meat freezer, load it up.
Please do something, because the time is running out, because they're going to censor the internet. They're going to try and make you have to, link it to your driver's license or your national ID or your federal ID or whatever. And then they'll know absolutely everything you read and say and do online, and it's not going to be very pretty, right?
No, it's going to be.
And this information isn't going to be on the internet for very much longer. So if you want to access that stuff, I mean, it's now's the time.
Yeah, download this audio or video file, keep it saved on a personal server. Fight back, freaks. Not physically, but fight back by making yourself as resilient as possible. Spread this information to as many people as possible. And like Whitney said, I don't do a good job of this a lot. I'll hold my hand up and admit that, but focus on the things that unites. Like, hey, we don't want the bankers running and creating the rules of the world. And we don't think they should be solving a global pandemic problem or a global climate problem if they do exist.
Yeah, we can't stop the vaccine passport system unless we get vaccinated people on our side, right? We can't stop the banker climate change takeover unless we get people who believe the official climate change narrative on our side.
Yes,
right.
I think we can.
You have to reach across the aisle to an extent, and you can do that with facts and information, and do it in such a way so it's not divisive. I'm not saying like don't talk about the other issues at all, because there is merit there, right? But we have very limited time and a lot of ground to cover, and I think it can be done, but we have to start adapting our strategies a little bit.
Yes, and that's it's another thing too that I'm very happy is being started here in Texas is the Texas Beef Initiative, getting to know your local rancher, getting them set up on a Bitcoin standard so that you can transact with them in Bitcoin and not have to worry about anything being censored, and emboldening them to supply their consumers directly with quality protein. And I think we need more of these, not just in Texas, all throughout the country, all throughout the world. Go meet your local farmers, have these types of conversations with them, go direct. And this is a good way to become secure and embolden them, because right now they're attacking the farmers and they're attacking the land here in the United States specifically.
And that's an attack on you and your food supply and your family. Just want to add that.
And again, there's so many distractions. Like this week alone, you had Aaron Rodgers, you had Kyle Rittenhouse, you have a bunch of other things like, is Lil Nas wearing a dress in GQ? Like, who cares? Like, it's all divide and conquer, squabble, squabble, squabble. Like, we have
to rise above, divide and conquer. We're screwed. That's basically what it comes down to. Yeah.
I think we can do it. Thanks to people like you, Whitney.
Thanks.
It's always a pleasure having you on, and I'm very excited for you to to welcome a new human into the world. And we need more.
Me too.
we need more people like you having as many children as possible. So I'm happy to hear that you have another one on the way.
Yeah, number 2. We'll see how it goes. You never know. Every pregnancy, every kid's different. But hopefully I'll be able to, actually have a little bit of rest before going back to work, because it's hard to stay away with so much going on,
Yeah. And
not a lot of people write about this stuff, at least not in a level-headed, objective way. So hopefully, people will carry the torch while I'm gone for a little bit.
Yeah, I'll do my best. I'm not as well detailed as you are, but I'll definitely be pushing these narratives that you help illuminate incredibly. And yeah, it is. You're going on maternity leave in winter 2021, 2022. It seems like they're going to turn it up a notch. So prepare yourself. Freaks. Where should we point the freaks this episode? Anything particularly you think they should look into or that you want to highlight?
You mean that's going on right now? Well, yeah. I think the big thing that's coming up is going to be this climate change pivot. So we've talked about it a lot already, but it was really announced in January before the Davos annual meeting, the World Economic Forum annual meeting. There's their agenda week. And Klaus Schwab said by the end of the year, it's going to be all about climate change. And that's basically happened, and it's going to get more extreme. I think we have to sort of, and I took a lot of risk doing this last year, trying to preempt narratives. It wasn't very popular to do that because people were like, oh, Whitney, you're so crazy for saying this shit. But it turned out I actually wasn't, because I'm trying to preempt the narrative so that people can see that, these are the groups running this shit and creating these policies and having national governments implement them. So we need to look, they want us talking about what's already happened in the past year and a half for the next 20 years, just like what happened with 9/11, right? Just focusing on September 11th, 2001 and just, forgetting what's happened since, and arguing about the minutia of what happened on that particular day. We can't really afford to do that because they've moved on from COVID-19. These guys are on a very different level already, and we totally need to go and preempt that narrative and shine light on where they are right now and keep up with these guys.
Yeah. These people who are pushing these narratives and putting these plans in motions are masters at manipulating the psyche. They know how to get humans scared, and then once they are scared, to force them to act or compel them to act in certain ways that they know many people will go along with. So be aware that you are being psychologically manipulated intentionally so that you produce an outcome that these people want. Take a step back. Do not fall prey to the divide and conquer tactics. Again, hand up. I do sometimes as well. It's easy to. That's why they are so successful.
Well, it's successful because it pushes our buttons, right? But we have to realize that there's a lot at stake here.
Yeah. the future of humanity, the future of our children. That's why we have this podcast. That's why Whitney does what she does. We have a society that's going to come after us, and what type of world do we want them to live in? A world where the Chinese social credit scoring system is exported to the whole planet, or a world built on freedom and the autonomy of the individual to make decisions that they think are best for their life.
Yeah, because this is really an existential crisis. And if you factor in the whole like metaverse transhumanist crazy shit, it's not just a existential crisis for society. It's existential really for the species.
Yes.
To a significant degree. If they succeed in implementing this control system in any significant way, it's going to be very hard to get out of it. That's why, for people that took the jab to keep their jobs and stuff like that, you may have put one foot into the system because you felt like you had to, but the more feet you put into it, the harder it will be for you to take steps on the parallel alternative path if you choose to do so at some point. So I really think if you don't like where this system leads, get off of that path as soon as you can and start going on the other path. But if you cross the line into CBDCs and you willingly adopt a CBDC system, there's no coming back from that. That's really the red line. I mean, once they have control of your finances and they have you in that system, it's over. And so people should be really clear about where their red lines are. And I would really argue that if you are someone that wants to build a parallel system to what's happening, don't even take one step into the system they're trying to build now. Take a step instead towards that parallel system.
Yes. Help create the flywheel for a Bitcoin circular economy. That's what we try to do here. You can donate to Whitney using Bitcoin. You can donate to this show using Bitcoin. We're on podcasting 2.0 platforms. Oh, which is
my podcast.
Okay, you're on there now? Okay, good.
Yeah, you can search for Unlimited Hangout. My podcast will come up. Mm-hmm.
Hell yeah. So Whitney's
podcasting 2.0.
You can stream sats to Whitney. You can make these content producers more secure. And we're going to get you hooked up on bitcointv.com too. So if they try to censor anything on YouTube or anything like that, Bitcoin TV will never censor you, Whitney. We're going to get you on there as well.
Okay. Well, I like not being censored. Fuck Patreon. Say it again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we're working on building not only distributed money, but distributed content distribution that will make us more robust from censorship and resilient against their attempts to censor, which is important. We need more Whitney Webbs. We need the information that you're getting out there. And thank you again for coming on. I wish you well as you go on this journey of bringing your second child into the world. And I can't wait to do it again.
All right. Awesome. We'll see you in a couple of months then. Oh, yeah. Hopefully things stay together a little bit. But yeah, thanks for letting me talk to your audience about this stuff and for all the work you do.
Yeah. Well, it's always a pleasure, Whitney. I will speak to you soon. Peace and love, freaks.